Hi, I'm Dr. Dustin Loveland. I'm the Surgical Director and Chief of Orthopedics and Sports Medicine here at the Children's Health Andrews Institute. Appreciate you viewing our leadership talks. This one will be regarding networking, how to establish a network, the importance of it, and how to cultivate it and use it to your advantage. All right, this talk is titled Cultivating and Utilizing a Diverse Professional Network. Start with a little story or anecdote, kind of explain where this talk is going. Who is Paul Revere? We all kind of know a little bit of the legend of Paul Revere. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote an epic poem, but in general, listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight ride of Paul Revere. And so he was, the story or legend goes, he was warned that the British were invading, one if by land, two if by sea, and heroically rode his horse into town and ringing a bell and letting everybody know, yelling at the top of his lungs that the redcoats were coming. Most of that is fictional, but in general, he wasn't the only one doing this. So why do we know his name? We don't know anybody else's. So one that Lisa Simpson knows is William Dawes, but none of us have ever really heard of him. And why is that? Well, he, rode on horseback from Boston the night of April 18th, 1775, just like Paul Revere, sounded the alarm that the Revolutionary War had begun. Just like Paul Revere, he rode in a different direction, but in general had the same mission. There was actually a third person that we definitely don't know his name either. Some people say, well, Paul Revere kind of rhymed better with the poetry and made for a more eloquent poem, but there seemed to be a little bit more to it. Paul Revere is someone we call an information broker. We'll talk more about that and how it applies to a network. There's a good write-up in this Malcolm Gladwell novel, The Tipping Point, which is a good read if you get a chance. But he played a key role in a social network. And remember, this is 1700s Boston. He knew where to go. He knew who could connect different groups of people. So he wasn't relying just on who he told to understand the message. When his methods, the news spread widely and quickly and was very efficient. Dawes rode without a plan, went to random doors and let people know. Information, because he didn't have a plan and didn't go to certain people with who he knew would let other people know. It was circulated pretty much only in small groups and was a lot less effective. And so the legend spread of Paul Revere's heroic effort and not so much of Mr. Dawes. If you dive a little further into it, these are network maps. They'll make a little more sense in a minute, but essentially we can see the interconnections of Paul Revere versus William Dawes. This is from Harvard Business Review from 2005 in a good write-up that somewhat mirrors Malcolm Gladwell's story. But if you looked at the social groups in Boston at that time, there tended to be 7 different social groups that people were involved in, and pretty much everyone was involved in one and not more than one. Revere belonged to 5, so it was a little bit of a social butterfly. He treated it as a spy mission, so he was out secretly, not ringing bells, not yelling at people at the top of his lungs, but going to specific houses. He dispatched other writers to go spread the message as well. He went to pretty famous houses where John Hancock and Samuel Adams were. So modern applications of the network or finding these brokers that can help achieve things that might not otherwise be possible without them. So we know Bill Gates is brilliant, had a great product, was extremely efficient at marketing his product, but one of his main breakthroughs was actually through his mom. So his mom served on a lot of United Way. And on the United Way board was the CEO at the time of IBM. And so that led to, as he was producing an operating system, it led to an introduction with him and Bill Gates, and eventually sat them down, put them in a room together, and led to getting the contract and really fueling Microsoft's future. So what are the advantages of networks? They provide private information. They provide access to diverse skill sets and can give you power. We'll go through this individually, but private information, when we make judgments on certain things, whether it's a job to take, a health provider to utilize, we use public and private information. Um, Public information, some people say, is too accessible now just because of the internet. We can Google whatever we want and we instantly, whether we're well connected or not, we all have access to the same instant search results. Um, that gives us pretty much no competitive advantage in terms of knowing something that someone else wouldn't be able to find. And so that's where the private information comes in. So we gather that from our personal contacts. These offer unique information that are not found in the public domain from a business perspective, the release of a product, knowledge about a job or interviewer, and finding common ground, or the person you're going to interview with next. And this went on a lot in residency training and fellowship, is this guy's always going to ask about this dude loves to fish. If you say anything about fishing, you have common ground. He won't ask you complicated questions. You'll talk about fishing the whole time. Things like that are helpful. The value of your private information depends on the trust within the network. So something you would tell to your closest friends and business associates would obviously be different to somebody that friended you on LinkedIn that you had never heard of just because they're technically within your network. Here's a very proud hire of ours that will be here in summer of 2021, Dr. Lee Pace, a well-established pediatric sports medicine surgeon out of Connecticut Children's. So he came about this job through his network, through private information. Someone, our former partner that left to move to Ohio, had changed his address on Facebook or some form of social media, and Dr. Pace, just being kind and curious, reached out and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he let him know that he was leaving and that the group here was great and would probably be hiring. And so he already had an inside lane to this job that turns out he was very interested in, and he knew about it before we knew about him, or before we even were posting the job. And probably in some regard, not that we wouldn't have hired him through regular channels anyways, but probably led to him coming to work here, and obviously benefits us as well as him. So then, diverse skill sets. And so you want diversity within your network. Linus Pauling, very famous chemist, one of very few people to win a Nobel Prize in 2 different areas. He attributed his success and Nobel Prizes to diverse contacts specifically. He said the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas, not a lot of ideas himself, but have a lot of people in the room with a lot of ideas. And that's a much easier way than just coming up with it on your own. Here's someone I was put in contact with and spoke with, and I'll touch more on him later, but he's a tech founder and CEO in Austin that was asked to be in entrepreneurship at a business school there. Told me an interesting story. I was asking him about his network and diversity of it. And he kind of talked about how you can never, and so having success in tech and entrepreneurship, somebody through channels reached out to him with an ice cream store startup. This is my daughter in Paris, enjoying some ice cream, and they wanted to hire him to kind of advise on the business. He enjoys ice cream, but knows nothing about the ice cream business, especially the environment in Austin. So rather than saying no, he reached out through friends of friends, through networking, and to people that have start and run successful small family-owned ice cream businesses. And instantly he had his own advisors and was, his own type of expert and could guide these people the way he wanted to. And that took, all of 30 minutes to get in touch with people. So power, our networks give us power. Traditionally in a business setting, it was always the CEO down and there was a hierarchy, and that's how, from like a military rank, your power was based on wherever you were situated at that time. These corporate organizations are changing. Startups and tech in Austin and what's left of Silicon Valley are very different companies. And information brokers, people that have knowledge and provide a skill and are an asset to a company, have power regardless of where they are in the hierarchy specifically. So you don't want to just maximize everything. So there is no max diversity, max power, max inside information and all that. If you have, you're going to eventually take away from the others. So if I want to maximize private information within orthopedics, then I'm going to have an extremely inbred network with no diversity of a bunch of male orthopedic surgeons, and that's the kind of takes away the whole point. So you have to find the balance of in all of this. And so the way to do that is to diagnose your network. This is from a Harvard Business Review article. It's something that's still used pretty much in any business school today. It's mapping your network, and it's a cool little exercise that you can almost do in your head. But essentially, you're writing down, say, 20 of your closest contacts, people you're in touch with personally or professionally. And you go down and list who introduced you to the contact. So who led you to meet that person at the time. And what you'll find on here, and when I did it for myself, you identify your brokers as people that are going to appear that have introduced you to people you're still in contact with. Those people are obviously very important to you. The other thing, a lot of people you just kind of run into, or you met in residency, or they were a co-fellow. No one introduced you, you just kind of came upon them. And that's where I listed it as me, and I found a lot of those. And so when I was finding me a lot, it seemed, two things are wrong with that. One, you're not using brokers to your advantage. The other thing is it's too inbred. We like to be around people that resemble us, that have similar backgrounds. We gravitate towards those people. I always think about, back to a college or med school mixer where you don't know very many people and you're trying to meet people. You always just find some common ground. And this guy, looks like me, he's from around the same town as me, or whatever you can find that's similar. We don't just naturally, we don't gravitate towards people that aren't like us. We don't say this person looks nothing like me, I need to go learn more about them. But that makes things pretty easy when we think about it. So executives at the highest level use this disproportionately, and they build networks based on people like them. That obviously leads to a lack of diversity from another perspective, but also with ideas. And so it seems like it might work because you have the same background, you have the same ideas, you agree with each other all the time, you have the same outlook, political leanings. But the problem is no one really disagrees with each other. So it sounds smooth, but you need some counterbalance there. So you run into essentially a bunch of yes men that tend to agree with each other. Not necessarily from a hierarchical standpoint of a subordinate agreeing with everything, but even people that are equal, agreeing with everything is not always how you come up with new ideas and change things. So it restricts your creativity, restricts your problem solving. Nobody's going to question you. We need people to push the horizon. We need people to play devil's advocate. Well, what if this? What if that? Next best. What's the next best option? It creates essentially what's called an echo chamber, where everybody just kind of agrees with each other, and it doesn't lead to progress. Here's an example of some clicks and some self-similarities within wardrobe choices. So if we map that out, if we map these little clicks out, we find panel A on the left, where we don't really have any interconnectivity. Everybody's like each other, and everybody kind of stays in their same little circles, and there's no progress. In panel B, essentially, there's a broker, and we find someone where there is some interconnectivity, and everybody's linked at that point. And regardless of business implications, it creates a community. A cool study, interesting, 2002. So an executive MBA networking event. They surveyed all these are executives, around 10 plus years in business, going back to business school, at a mixer trying to network. And the goal, based on a survey before it started, was your goal to accomplish here was to meet as many different people as possible. Everybody wore a device where they knew everybody's backgrounds and who they were, and they could follow how long people were in proximity to each other. But they found what people would probably expect, that when people found common ground, they tended to gravitate towards each other. Investment bankers were talking to investment bankers, marketing with marketing. And then the interesting thing was the bartender was the one who kind of won the award for the reaching out to the most new people. There's a proximity principle that's also a pitfall, which is, people in your neighborhood. Also, you can think of it not necessarily just as distance apart, but also at work. So if you're in the same department, people hang out with the same people in the same department. They come up with the same ideas. They live in the same neighborhood with the same background. Another way of creating these echo chambers. So ways out of these pitfalls, shared activities, and these are things that are good for just health, happiness, but from a networking perspective. So Bill Gates, it wasn't that he worked his way into IBM or gave an elevator pitch and managed to schmooze and get in with IBM. It was longstanding trust through his mom that she had known the IBM CEO for a long time and had access to private information that they were needing an operating system. And so that shared activity of serving on a board together led to, change, the way we see computing. Other shared activities, sports teams, and these are things that we just do in general. Maybe we don't think of it as networking, but they're actually can be very productive. Community service, the gym you work out at, charitable foundations, serving on boards, our church, and a lot of these things. What's nice about them too, like I met my PCP. She's a PA at the gym, and people from my gym send me patients, and they don't feel bad about approaching me. If you're sweaty and smelly at the same time, you're equals no matter what you do. There's when you're side by side with people, whether it's your people in your own business or people in different types of businesses, it kind of puts you on common ground, and things become a little more casual where people are comfortable. Back to brokers. So they had social capital. It's nice when you identify these brokers, whether it's from the exercise or just mentally, who introduces you to people. Those people, and doesn't have to necessarily be, Dr. Andrews knows everybody, so he's my broker, and I go to him because he's the most powerful. It doesn't have to be that, and experts tend to suggest finding those brokers that are not in those authority positions, those ones that are not utilized by other people. So find those kind of under the radar brokers. A question arises: should we notify our brokers? Are you identifying yourself as using them, or if you are not returning the favor, is it a one-sided relationship? People tend to say no, that it does make them feel appreciated. It does deepen the relationship, build trust, which is the whole point of all of this. Back to David, again, tech startup CEO in Austin. We spoke for a bit specifically about networks, and these are people far more experienced than I that I do value their opinions. And so he kind of talked about his shared activities when he looked at his network and diagnosed it. The diversity came from, yes, he has a lot of friends in tech from Silicon Valley and Austin, but his hobby, he lives on a ranch and likes raising cattle, and he's got buddies in that have absolutely nothing to do with anyone in tech, and they're completely different lifestyle, completely different people, completely different educational and backgrounds and political leanings. And he also serves as a volunteer firefighter. He's got his firefighting buddies, and so he was very big on the shared activities. One thing he thought was cool from a networking perspective is, back in the Rolodex days, but somewhat recently, he had a financial advisor that he hadn't dealt with in 10, 15 years, called him and just said, hey, thanks for working with me in, whatever it was, 1998. And he just thought that was pretty cool that that guy kept his card. And of all the people he deals with, how often he would have to do this to kind of give someone that they no longer have a business relationship a heads up on a 20-year anniversary that pretty much means nothing at some point. But it meant a lot to him, and kind of made him think that, well, if I ever need a help or someone else needs help, then I remember this guy's still in the game. Researching people that you want in your network, not necessarily stalking, but learning what they read, what conferences do they attend. And that's was tended to be a common theme, was these conferences, and people that are have a fringe interest in something else was go to conferences and learn from these people and meet people there. And it's kind of interesting to be it's comforting to be in a room full of orthopedic surgeons, but if you go to a blockchain cryptocurrency, you're the odd one out, and you're the one that people want to talk to because they're bored of talking about Bitcoin. And so going to these conferences, at least in a pre-COVID and hopefully near future, tended to be something that most of these guys really harped on for expanding their network. He was asked to teach an entrepreneurship class, which he gladly did in Austin at St. Edward's University. And not long after was asked to be interim dean when their dean left. And so again, rather than saying, I don't know how to be a dean, I just was willing to teach this class, he contacted his business school dean and sat down and learned the pearls and pitfalls of that. And so another example of utilizing his network rather than just saying I'm not comfortable assuming that role. He said the relationships are give and take. When you mentor somebody, care about their success, we're pretty good about hoping for the best for other people, but also make those that helped us along the way feel ownership for your success. Show them what they helped you get. He was a big proponent of LinkedIn. Uses the search function, which allows you to essentially search, and it'll tell you if you have a contact in common. If there's someone specific you're looking at, you can also search by job type or company. And people generally like to help people. So when surveys go out about networking and would you be open if someone reached out to you, a stranger reached out to you on LinkedIn and wanted to connect and chat or have a phone call about something, almost everybody says yes. Mr. Durovich is our president and CEO of Children's Health. So he's entering his 19th year as CEO, and the average tenure is 6 years. And so, kind of his key. And when I asked him why is he different? Why is he, so far out of the norm to remain successful in a fairly complicated city of Dallas? And, he acknowledged continuing to grow and acknowledged using his network for certain things. And when we're expanding, whether it's building this building here or building new developments in other cities that we have currently ongoing, he reaches out to people outside of Children's Health, outside of our architects. And he tends to get the best minds when he's creating a project. He also kind of expanded on knowing our audience, not necessarily our network. If your network consists, he's taking care of a community that includes a lot of underrepresented and uninsured and a poor population that he may not identify with, but he also admits to researching and knowing the culture around him, local newspapers, knowing the opinion of people around him that aren't necessarily like him, in order to fully understand what he's trying to do here. Regarding his mentors, again, give the gift of thanks, make them feel responsible for your success. He said he had one of his mentors from Kellogg Business School back in the day reach out to him that he was in Dallas and invited him to Children's Dallas and gave him a tour and kind of said, this is you helped me get this. And I think it was a very touching moment for the two of them. So LinkedIn, I'm by no means an expert, but just some general principles. There's no reason if you're a professional of any kind that you shouldn't have a profile. People look for it, even just your basic information. Use a good photo, not a selfie from Six Flags. Don't accept every request. And a lot of this is from discussions with executives is don't clutter it too much. You do have the ability to unfollow, so you can accept a request and make it to where you may still be a connection, but you won't get cluttered with their information. Search function works well. It's very intuitive. Explore the networks of your brokers. You do have people that would love to connect you. There's nothing would please them more than to feel like they connected you with somebody. Appropriate things are ask them if they're cool if you reach out, and you can say, hey, I'm friends with Salitza, do you mind if we chat? Or a lot of people would like to introduce you and say, hey, my friend is looking for this, would you mind discussing it with them? And in general, people like to help people. Dormant ties, these are people you used to know that you may not keep in touch with, might even be old high school friends. Reach out to people, and it doesn't take, a text message might reestablish an old relationship. So with the UFC, Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta were old friends that hadn't talked in a while, met up at a high school friend's wedding. Dana was managing a few UFC fighters and knew the business itself was kind of fledgling at the time. And his buddy Lorenzo was a successful businessman, and they kind of got together and decided to buy the UFC and sold it, I believe, for $4 billion or so. All from a little random connection at a wedding. So sometimes these little chance encounters can lead to a lot. You don't need an agenda to touch base, although it probably helps, meaning if you're going to reach out, if you have something in common or something in mind to talk about, it's good. Identify friends of friends. This is something we do, or I do often when we're making connections with, be it a school district or sports association. Doesn't take much to just reach out and say, hey, does anyone know anyone with this sports league? And, oh yeah, my wife's friend is on the board. Pretty easy. So here's a story. Michelle McKenna, she works for the NFL, but essentially she was a CIO, CTO for some tech companies, and even had worked for Disney and some big companies at the time. Was checking her fantasy football stats on NFL.com and got looking around and saw they had a job posting board, and on NFL.com, it mentioned a tech type position that she wasn't too familiar with, but was interested. And so she reached out randomly to someone at a company she used to work for that now works for an executive search firm. That person said, nice to talk to you. We're not representing the NFL in their search, but I know who is. I'll put you in touch. So loose random encounter leads to her speaking to the actual executive firm that's searching. That after talking to them, gets her an interview. She pitches why why the position needs to be expanded and why she needs to be the person for the job, and she gets the job. And so the highest ranking female executive in the NFL, and she was fully responsible for the virtual 2020 draft, which was pretty cool if you got to watch it. People talk about the person you haven't met yet. This goes back to avoiding that self-similarity principle. So a more imperfect social search engine, find that person that you wouldn't randomly talk to, the least interesting person, an annoying person that you'd want to avoid. Fight your innate choices, create new contacts, map out your footprints, see where, if you go to the same, from the clinic to use the same bathroom down the hall, if you go to the gym at the same time, see the same people, try to change that up a little bit. Social hubs, eating lunch in the doctor's lounge or eating lunch in the regular cafeteria. Some of these things can be beneficial to meet new people or even just to be seen, and be courageous when you do this. Some healthcare advantages, Bill Nye, and there's been a million variations of this quote by other people, but everyone you ever meet knows something you don't. So you can learn something from everybody. I think in healthcare we have a unique opportunity. We get to interact with people, at least in a clinic setting, almost every day. We meet, 20 plus new people. Um, I like to always find common ground, whether it's a T-shirt with a, Pensacola Beach on it, or a, we're all for the most part here from Texas, so we all have similar something geographically that in common. You can find something in common with everybody. When we're not totally pressed for time in clinic, I think people appreciate that interaction. I use what's called sticky notes on our EMR, where, if it's a patient that was playing a video game on our iPad that we talked about, I might jot that down. So next time, I can, maybe a year later, and next time I can say, hey, you're still playing Roblox on your iPad, and people appreciate that. And maybe I would have never remembered it, but I think that little common ground goes a long way. And I ask parents what they do. It's always interesting. Randomly, it doesn't have to be to further my career. I had a mom that worked at Whataburger, and today, because we talked about that, she brought me taquitos at her son's follow-up. So I got free sausage, egg, and cheese taquitos out of it. So sometimes it doesn't have to be a career move. Some people refer to these as dots, and I'll go over that in a second. So the introvert's guide. So it doesn't have to be awkward speed dating. Some people say introverts might be better at networking because we're used to awkward interactions. So when we're doing awkward networking, and I don't know, I consider myself somewhat of an introvert too. These one-on-one, face-to-face interactions, we're kind of used to the awkwardness, so it doesn't bother us. Collect dots. What people refer to these dots are, there's something, whether it's Whataburger with that patient, or the patient that's been to Pensacola, or just random things. You're whether they're documented on LinkedIn or in your mind or on my EMR, they're important to learn, and you have to take an active approach, whether it's coffee, interview, LinkedIn chat. You have to actively seek these things out. And with David and Chris Durovich, these are things where I just reached out and said, David through a friend of a friend, and Chris Durovich is obviously our CEO. I just reached out and said, hey, you got an hour to talk about networking? And there was no hesitation for them to be willing to do that. I feel like I learned a lot more from them than they did me, but it was such a positive thing that had I not sought it out, I would have never gained that knowledge. And so it's something that we don't often seek out to do those things, but in general, people are willing to help. So connecting those dots. So we have to, whether we're organizing them through LinkedIn or in our head, we have to find a way to connect those dots, because we know how to help someone with someone we know, but without us being the broker, that they would not have been able to make that connection. Everybody watching this, or everybody in an audience somewhere, knows someone that someone else needs to know, that someone would benefit from being introduced to. Some takeaways: it's not speed dating. It doesn't have to be terrible. I don't know. I guess originally networking to me sounded like an awkward thing that weird people would go to and awkwardly talk to each other, and just sounds terrible. But it's a lot of stuff that we do unintentionally, and I think it's very important. We use some degree of networking all the time, whether it's next door posts or Facebook searches, and we like private or semi-private information. We might go to a restaurant more based on a review online, or a review from a friend, than we would what their website looks like, or what pictures they put on social media. You want a contractor that has worked with somebody and you trust that if that person likes them, then it's worth the money. Prosper moms. That's how everything gets done where I live, is the advice from the moms. Nothing gets done. Nobody goes anywhere without asking the Prosper moms first. And so that's a network that people trust each other on. And when someone's kid tears their ACL, they don't Google ACL, and the first doctor that comes up on the Google search results must be the best, and go to that hospital. Our marketing budget may disagree, but in general, it's they use their network of people and friends of friends, and we have people that all have families local that'll contact me because someone that lives in Denver tore their ACL. Who should they go to? And if it's someone that I know and trust, then that helps them a lot and puts them at ease. Helps me assist with referrals. Here's someone that came in Sunday night on call, did surgery Monday morning. Family lives in Orange County. I need someone to see them next week when they go home. So I reached out to someone that worked in LA. Their friend was a PA at this hospital. So right after surgery, they were able to call, name drop that PA and say, she said we could hopefully get in this day, and it happened easily and, facilitated things. Didn't benefit me in any way from a personal standpoint, but, it's good for community. Here's one last little success story, and this is a true story. This is a tech employee in Miami, had an uncle with COVID that wasn't doing well. Uncle lived in Dallas. He was seen at a major hospital here and was kind of stabilized and actually discharged to rehab. He started to decline in rehab again and needed to go back to the same facility, but at that point it was overwhelmed, and they physically didn't have all elective surgeries shut down. They just didn't have ventilators. It was impossible for him to take them. And pretty much everywhere this rehab facility was with pretty limited means was saying they're capped. Sorry. And so for whatever reason, her boss, the CEO of the company, knew about it, who happens to be a friend of mine. And so he just, with no expectations, texted and said, hey, one of my employees' uncle in Dallas is not doing well. Any way you could assist? And again, I could have said, sorry, man, I'm in orthopedics. I don't think I can help. And no one would have thought any different. But, through a semi-random contact, my wife's law practice previous partner, her husband is vice president at a major hospital up here. So I just texted him and said, hey, I know everybody's swamped. Do you know if any of your facilities have availability? He said, I do. In Denton, we have beds available. So he gave me the number to give to this family, and they were able to call, get the patient transferred, name drop the vice president. And it was the easiest thing in the world. But, it took a couple hours of texting to, I don't want to say saved a life, but you never know. So I think there's obviously positive things in healthcare that don't have to be about, making our way in the world and getting a better job. Thank you. Most of my info came from where I'm currently doing my executive MBA at Northwestern Kellogg. So thanks to them, and thanks for attending.